Well, hey, y'all. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you all for being here. I know a lot of you drove from out of town, and that just makes me feel very special and very welcome and grateful to be here. And thank you for the fun introduction. So I guess let's get started. In my almost 33 years of life, one thing that I've realized is that childhood dreams are destined to die. Childhood dreams are destined to die. And by a show of hands, how many people in here remember some of their first childhood dreams? Anybody? Yeah, a lot of y'all. Same here. And my first one was born at Newfound Gap. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that area, not too far away, but it was on the border of North Carolina and the Tennessee state lines. And I remember at 5 years old being on vacation there with my family. And I was so excited that I could stand in North Carolina and Tennessee at the same time. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then I happened to look across the parking lot, and I saw this sign, and it had a really long word on it, and I could read at 5, but I didn't know what that word was. I had never seen it before. And so I asked my mother, what does that sign say? And she said, well, it says Appalachian Trail. And I said, well, what is that? And she explained to me that it's a path where usually kind of crazy people walk from Georgia to Maine, almost 2,200 miles. And I was like, well, let's go. Let's go do this right now. And I remember grabbing her hand and running down the trail and thinking that if I could get her to walk far enough north to where it made more sense to keep going than to turn around and go back, that we could do that trail that day. Because, 2,200 miles means nothing really to a 5-year-old. So, but she told me, no, we have to go back to the car, but someday when you grow up, you can do this. But there's kind of something dangerous about the word someday, because it doesn't really have a solid timeline. It's kind of a non-existent timeline. And a lot of times we escape creating concrete goals because we use the false timeline of someday. And the same was true of me. I went to high school and I graduated as salutatorian of my class, and then I moved on to Auburn University, where I got a degree in biosystems engineering with a minor in agronomy and soils. And I was really proud of that degree, but again, I kept pushing this dream back to someday. And then in 2014, I woke up one day in Denver, Colorado, and I was, pretty successful because I had focused on the things that society deems important for a young person to do. And so I completed this recipe of what should make me happy and successful. But I woke up having a good job, a nice office, and I was playing house with my 2 beautiful dog children. And I'm like, I'm kind of living life backwards. And it's been 20 years since I said that someday I wanted to do the Appalachian Trail. And of course, I couldn't do it when I was 5, but why am I not doing that now? And so right then I decided that I had made a mistake letting society design my life instead of me taking control and designing my own life. So at that point, I knew that the first step in beginning to design my own life would have to start on the Appalachian Trail. A through hike of the Appalachian Trail consists of traversing 14 states, almost 2,200 miles from Springer Mountain, Georgia, all the way up to Mount Katahdin in Maine. In March of 2015, I found myself at Amicalola Falls, which is the beginning of the approach trail, which leads to Springer Mountain, the official starting point of the Appalachian Trail. And I was extremely nervous, and here I'm trying to pretend like, yeah, I got this, I know what I'm doing. But rightly so, I should have been nervous because I had 38 pounds on my back, including too much food, too much water, and gear that I had never used in my life. And I knew that I just kind of had to figure it out. And why not start my first backpacking trip, on a trip that was going to be 6 months long. I did read a lot of reviews on that gear, though, so I figured that had to count for something. In addition to reading the reviews on the gear, I had also read a lot of blogs, and those blogs kind of indicated to me that I could get used to eating rice and pasta on the trail, and that I would no longer have any kind of flushing toilet or nice treated water. I would have to collect my own and treat my own, and there would be no showers except for maybe once a week when I was in town resupplying on food and other things that you might need on trail. I knew that I would be sleeping in a tent or some kind of shelter that I carried on my back unless I was lucky enough to score a place in a 3-sided shelter. And this one is fancy, mind you, okay? There are a lot of these all throughout the Appalachian Trail, but this is one of the nicer ones up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It's a 3.5-sided structure. So my first night on trail, this is in Springer Mountain Shelter, and I was lying there thinking, what have I gotten myself into? But I did make a point to keep my head towards the opening of the shelter because mice like to run along the back in the middle of the night. So if you don't want your head trampled over by a mouse, then you sleep with it to the opening. Well, I also found out that that's not necessarily true because one definitely crawled across my back that night. And, you know, I thought, though, about the last several conversations I had had with my dad before I left because he was like, you're going to die out there. You know, you're going out there alone to do this thing and you're not going to make it. And I was really proud of myself, even though I was having a little bit of doubt that night, because I realized that other people's fears don't have to be my fears. They're their fears, and I don't need to let other people's fears hold me back from the things that I wanted to do. And not to say that I wasn't nervous and scared for what I was getting into, but there's no reason to let other people hold you back just because they're afraid for you, even though they mean well sometimes. So around this time, my first day on trail, I decided to pull out my phone and record because I feel like it was kind of like my Wilson, my cell phone, you know, like in Castaway Wilson. That was what my phone was to me. It was something to kind of talk to and vent to and let somebody, whoever might be listening, know what was going on with me and all these new experiences I was going through. Because I didn't want to approach vlogging like I'm some backpacking expert. I wanted to approach it like, hey, watch, I'm about to make a lot of mistakes. And before I left for the trail, I knew I would blog, but one of my friends said to me, well, have you thought about vlogging? And I was like, what's vlogging? And she explained to me, you know, you create a channel and put videos of what you're doing. If you send them to me, I can edit them and put them out so that, you know, your friends and family can see what's going on with you while you're on trail. So I thought that would be a good idea. So that's what we did, and that's where the channel was really born. But as the trail went on, I met all these cool people, and I thought that I was going out there to kind of find myself or to get the answers of life, you know, or whatever, do some soul searching. But I'm so glad that I wasn't alone. I'm so glad that I met wonderful people who also had a passion for life. And there is no real stereotypical hiker. Most people are between, well, below the age of 25 or older than 50, because those are the times in people's lives, either before they commit to a career or once they've retired, that they can get out there. And this fella, Cap, he gave me my trail name. And if y'all aren't familiar with the thru hiking community or the backpacking community in general, oftentimes we receive trail names based on something we do, something we say, something we carry with us. One of my best friends on trail, his name is Perk, because he carried a percolator on the Appalachian Trail. And so this was Cap, but he was the one, he and his two friends who were collecting trash all the way from Georgia to Maine. They picked up 1,100 pounds, by the way, on the whole trail. And these are people who are supposed to love nature, right? But anyway, so Cap and his friends couldn't remember my civilian name, as Perk says, Jessica, so they were like, that old girl from Dixie, and then it kind of stuck, so that's how I became Dixie. But there are all sorts of people out there. So in the middle, almost, of this crew, you can see a short little girl, and her name was Styx. She was 10 years old, and a lot of those people in the picture are her family members, her siblings, because there were 5 kids and 2 parents hiking together. And then here, the 2 ladies right next to the sign, that's Bluebird and Hakuna Matata. Bluebird thru-hiked that year at 71 years old. And that's her daughter to the left, Hakuna Matata, and they did that journey together, which I thought was absolutely incredible. But on the Appalachian Trail and other trails like the PCT and CDT, there's this wonderful thing called trail magic. And this is where people that we refer to as trail angels come out to the trail and donate their time and money just to give you things. And imagine walking through the woods and suddenly somebody jumps out and says, hey, would you like a hamburger? You're like, what are the strings attached here? You know, are you trying to poison me? Or, you know, how much does this hamburger cost? And meanwhile, you've been eating, you know, slop for a few days. So anyway, this is just one example. People come out and set up tents, and this group in particular goes every Easter weekend, and they come from Wisconsin. So it's a huge thing. It's a huge community. But the wonderful thing about all of these people that I met on trail and that I got to know if I needed something and we were going to help each other out, or, when these people were passing out trail magic, nobody looked at me and said, oh, wait a second, who did you vote for in the last election before I give you this food? Or, I'm sorry, do we believe in the same religion? They accepted that people come from different walks of life and have different beliefs, and we're just good to each other because we're humans. So that was an incredible, incredible experience, and something that I had never experienced in my life. And just to be extra cliche, it started to, restore my faith in humanity. And it's crazy. Until you experience a hamburger in the middle of the woods after 5 days of ramen noodles, y'all just don't know. But I saw amazing sights like McAfee Knob and Charlie's Bunyan and the whites of New Hampshire. And it just felt so free because it was the first time that I had ever been truly in control of my life. It was also the first time I'd ever hurt that bad before, but it was still incredible. I got to see the seasons change, and I got to meet the gray jays. If y'all haven't ever met a gray jay, they are like the begging dogs in the world of birds, because they can hear you crinkle a wrapper, and it's like, and you see there's one on a branch, and all you have to do is put a little food. I know you're not supposed to feed the wildlife, I know, but anyway, you put a little food on your hand, and they will come land on your hand and get the food and go. So I had a lot of fun with those. Do what? Exactly. I'm just giving trail magic to the birds. But not every day on trail is a good day, right? Sometimes the trail tries to eat you, and this kind of reminds me of the Never-Ending Story, which is horribly sad. So I honestly cry when I watch that movie. And then sometimes you hurt, like your Achilles grows 2 sizes too big. And then there are bug bites and blisters, and there's this thing about hiking and toenails, they just don't go together. So this is where my toenails had fallen off and they were trying desperately to come back. But now the picture on the left with all the bug bites, I sent that picture to my mom and I was like, look at this. And she said, oh my gosh, what happened to his foot? And I said, Mom, that's my foot. And then there is wildlife, and I actually only saw one rattlesnake the entire AT. I made up for that on the PCT, but on the AT I only saw one. But I did meet a rather unfriendly bear in Virginia, and the area that we were hiking through had been closed to camping because of an aggressive bear. And for some reason, when we were walking through and I saw this bear approaching, I didn't put 2 and 2 together and go, that might be the aggressive bear that they put signs up about. And so I was getting water out of water source, and luckily I had other people around me because I had never had an interaction with a bear outside of a car, and even in the car it was like at a very far distance. And so anyway, I'm collecting water and I'm really excited that this bear keeps coming closer. And one of the guys in the group said, that's not normal. That bear knows that we're here and it should be running away. And I'm like, no, this is great. We're going to get a good picture of this bear, And so the bear kept approaching and it got behind a tree. So I kind of stepped over to a rock so I didn't stand in the water source, but it was kind of towards the bear and to the side so I could see around the tree, and he did not like that. So I think that he was like, did you just advance me, lady? And when you see a bear, there are a couple of rules. You're supposed to make sure that if they're being aggressive or not afraid of you, that you try to look big. Hold up your trekking poles or click them together or, make noise, all of those things, because you don't want to look like lunch. And also, if a bear starts coming towards you, you're not supposed to run because that can trigger their chase instinct. Kind of like if you drag a string by a cat and it pounces onto it. So, same idea. But anyway, this bear kind of grunts at me and looks at me, and we look into each other's eyes and kind of have this moment. And then for some reason, I kind of knelt down and said, hey, darling. Like that was a good idea, as if this huge bear was a little puppy or something. Well, the bear really didn't like that. I guess in bear language, that's like cussing him out, because he came running at me. And there's this interesting thing about a bluff charge. You don't know it's a bluff until they stop. But as the bear is coming towards me, I turn around and start running, even though I know that's not what I'm supposed to do in all the blog posts I had read. And so I start running. Luckily, the group that was with me, they said, Dixie, stop running. So I stopped, and I turned around, and I'm like, oh, yeah. And they kind of came close to me, and we huddled together. I'm glad they really liked me because, I just had to, so all of them just had to be faster than me, right? But anyway, we kind of huddled together, and the bear stopped, and he threw his arms up, and he hissed like a cat. He's like, and then he just started kind of settling down, but I could see that his hair was up on his back, and then he kind of was like, well, I guess I don't want to fight 5 of y'all, so, and then he started messing with the bush, and we cut out of there. But things can get interesting, especially when you don't really know what you're doing. So I would read up on bear safety before you go hiking the Appalachian Trail and try to actually implement it. But anyway, the point is, sometimes there are bad days, and often bad days make the best stories. But on the Appalachian Trail, and also PCT and CDT close to it, there are only, of all the people that start the thru hike, only about 20% actually finish. And I think that this is because most people are so quick to quit on a bad day. And in normal life, we can relate to that too. We often quit relationships, work, our goals, our dreams, all of those things because we're so easy to give up on a bad day, or it is so easy to give up on a bad day. And so I made a point to tell myself the only way that I'm going to quit this trail, which I had already made up my mind, they would have had to just drag me away from it, you know, but the only way that I would quit is if I was sitting out on a beautiful summit of a mountain and I was hearing birds chirping and the sun was shining and the butterflies were fluttering, and if I said, well, this really stinks, then I could quit. But otherwise, I just had to give myself some time and you know, kind of get over it. So don't quit on a bad day. And I didn't. And then I found myself at mile 2100, only 89.2 miles from the top of Katahdin, and it honestly felt surreal. It didn't seem like I had actually just traveled that many miles. And then there was summit day, and it was a very icy Katahdin because I kind of took a little while to get there. You're supposed to finish tentatively by October 15th, but it was October 19th, and there was a lot of snow and ice, but it was a beautiful day. But right there when I was on that mountaintop, it was probably about 23 degrees and really windy. And if you had asked me in that moment, will you ever do another thru hike? I'd say no, absolutely not. This was great and fun, but I'm ready to go home. And then I got home, and people started emailing me and asking me, hey, what pack did you use? Or what tent did you use? Or what shoes did you wear? Do you think I should go in boots or trail runners? And I wanted to continue the channel, but I couldn't feel myself. Hi, I'm driving to my number 3 part-time job today because, you know, I'm not an engineer still. And so I knew that people didn't want to watch that, but I knew that I could share my knowledge and experience and hopefully encourage other people to get out and ruin their lives like I had. And then also, I started getting a lot of emails to where I felt like I couldn't answer all of them. So I created this backpacking forum group on Facebook because sometimes the problem is the solution. And I wanted to be able to email all these people back and tell them, but I decided I'd create this little community where we could all kind of help each other out. And so that's what I did. So it didn't take long staying connected to the thought of the trail in that way that I decided I have to get back out on the trail. It just started, I mean, it was by Christmas, y'all. So like not even 2 months. Well, a little over 2 months. But I decided I was getting back out there. So I decided to set my eyes towards the Pacific Crest Trail. And it goes from Mexico to Canada, about 2,650 miles, through California, Oregon, and Washington. But I knew that if I stepped foot on the Pacific Crest Trail, that it was not going to stop there, and that it was either 1 or 3. So I decided that I was going to have to do the Triple Crown. And on the East Coast, again, Appalachian Trail, West Coast, Pacific Crest Trail, and then on the Continental Divide, the Continental Divide Trail. So in April of 2017, I found myself out on the PCT, mile 1, and I was ecstatic because I was going to be learning new things. It was going to be a thru hike, and I wouldn't have as many firsts, like, oh, my first hitchhike, or my first hostel, or my first trail magic. But I was going to have my first desert experience because I had never backpacked in the desert. I mean, this was my second backpacking trip. So there were cool things in the desert, like critters like, the name escapes me right now. Thank you, yes, horny toad. And this one posed so well for this picture because he's dead. But I thought, you know, he can get one more useful thing out of his existence, you know, and so I kind of posed him up and then gave him a proper burial. But 2017 was a high snow year, so that was something that was completely new because other than that snow I showed you on Katahdin, I had never backpacked in snow or really stepped on snow. You know, we get like that much in Alabama. So, so I learned to backpack in the snow, probably not the safest and best way to do it, but you know, I like to throw myself to the wolves. But the problem with snow is that it melts. So then I found myself going across these raging rivers, and this is just one example. Luckily, we didn't have to swim too many, but this one was a swimmer, and it was a doozy. And then after all the snow we went through, there were fires because snow brings water, which brings plants, which will burn, and then we had a lot of fires on the PCT. That was also a new thing. I didn't experience anything like that on the Appalachian Trail. And that bottom right one looks like something from The Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? It kind of does to me. And then after I got through the fire, more snow. But then came Canada, and I had finished the second leg of the Triple Crown. In last year, 2018, I started the Continental Divide Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, a tiny bit of Idaho, and Montana for about 3,000 miles. And I got to learn new things on this trail also, like walking in exposed areas and having an imminent strike danger. You know, lightning is all around and my hair is standing up. So I'm like, oh, great. And there's nowhere to hide. I know it's like, well, seek cover. There was no cover to be had. So also I got to meet a mountain lion, and we had a stare off for about a minute and a half. And I decided the best way to deal with the mountain lion. I did better than the bear. I didn't call it darling, but I did play the harmonica for it because for some reason I thought that it would sound like something it had never heard before and it might freak it out. But then I was like, what if I just sounded like a dying bird or some other animal, you know, and now it's really going to attack me. But it wandered off about its way. And I also was really, really brave in grizzly bear country. Super brave. Like I slept with my bear spray brave. And towards the end, Mother Nature was yet again not so kind, and we experienced a lot of snow. And it was here that I realized, you know, you can take things head on, but sometimes you probably need to be a little smarter about it. I didn't know anything about avalanche safety or, you know, the prime conditions for an avalanche, but I would guess that raining and freezing and then snowing powder on top of some of that is pretty prime conditions. So that was kind of scary. But before I knew it, last October, I had finished the Continental Divide Trail, which meant that I had completed the Triple Crown of hiking. So the takeaways that I got from the Triple Crown, which I've kind of covered, is that I think it's so important for us to design our own lives. I think it's important that you take control of your own life. And that can be kind of scary because then the only person that's accountable for the way that you live your life is you. And then you can't blame it on anyone else, right? But I really do think that when you take control of your life and the things that you want to do, it's just so much better. And then other people's fears are not our own. Learn to coexist and appreciate those from all walks of life. Don't quit on a bad day. And also focus on things you can change. I know that I had so many bad days out there where it was windy and rainy and I was just mad about it. And you know how much that helped it stop raining? Not at all. And it put me in a really bad mood too. So I learned to try to recognize the things that were positive from the rain. Like I didn't have to carry as much water because that meant that the water sources were flowing. That the greenery would be a little brighter. And if y'all are familiar with backpacking on the Appalachian Trail, those little red F's always come out after the rain. And I love seeing those little guys. And then get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that sounds a little contradictory, but the fact that if you put yourself into situations that you're a little nervous or a little uncomfortable, that probably means that you're growing from it, like standing up here on a stage and talking to a room full of people, for example. And then incredible things can happen when we believe in ourselves and what we are doing. A lot of people ask me when I started the channel that has now become pretty much my full-time job, you know, was that my intention? And I'm like, no, I just wanted somebody to talk to, and I was doing this thing anyway, and I thought that only my friends and family would watch, but there were so many people who believed in me and started following me on my other journeys too. So I think that once you really believe in yourself and start doing the things that you care about, that it becomes important to other people too. So backpacking was my thing. Well, through hiking the Appalachian Trail was my big dream. And then that led to other trails. And then that led to trying to teach other people through YouTube how to learn to backpack. And then I really got just so interested in capturing nature. for people who couldn't get out and enjoy the trail. So if I'm like, yeah, it's really cold today, I don't just want to tell you, I want to try to show you. If I'm upset, I want people to feel why I'm upset, or if it's hot, to show. And so I really am trying to get better and better at capturing nature in videography, and I'm no professional, I haven't taken classes or anything like that, but it's just fun to me, and all the little critters and ants and bugs, I don't know, it's great. So I know I showed y'all pictures, but I'd like to show you just a little video clip so that y'all can see some of the trail life in action. Bad days are worth it when you see stuff like this. Yes. There are just so many good people on trail. You just don't know who you're gonna meet. It's really cool. And I compared the AT and I think any trail, it's like Alice in Wonderland, you just don't know all the characters that you'll meet in the woods, but it really makes the journey what it is. We all loved it. Gotcha. This will be the last 100-mile marker of my trip. I have officially today walked 2,100 miles, and it's been a long time coming, but it's actually gonna happen now. So pretty excited, and it's just kind of a crazy feeling that I think can't be explained until you do something like this. And this is probably, I'd say, the biggest accomplishment of my life for sure. 30. So backpacking and through hiking the Appalachian Trail, and this whole journey was my dream. And I just think that it would be really incredible if we could teach our children and the youth that childhood dreams are not ridiculous, they're not immature, that there's something that they should strive for. And backpacking was my thing, but a lot of you in here tonight raised your hands about what your childhood dreams are, that you remember them. And I challenge y'all to revive those dreams, and maybe you could create a new hobby out of them, maybe a side hustle, maybe you could start a new business, maybe you could have a new activity to do with your children or your wife or your husband. And childhood dreams are destined to die unless we choose to live them. Thank you.